All right, let's talk Green Bay Packers here for a little bit. Look, the Packers have been involved with a lot of interesting moves this offseason. Of course, the one that made the most headlines was the addition of running back Josh Jacobs from the Raiders, and of course, letting go longtime Green Bay Packer great Aaron Jones. I know there's a lot of consternation, confusion, frustration with the Packers faithful about why would they do such a thing, move off Aaron Jones and then sign a big deal to or allocate a big deal to Josh Jacobs, but it looks like there was a method to the madness. And I think there's a chance to be a pretty smart play by the Packers. Let's get into an article explaining it, and then we'll go into the details why. So first, this is the article. This is from Packers Wire. With Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon, and even Emmanuel Wilson, the Green Bay Packers have constructed a bigger and more physical backfield at the running back position this offseason. At the NFL Combine, GM Brian Gutekunst mentioned wanting a bigger back on the roster at running back, especially for short yardage situations, colder weather, and for closing out games. And just to hit that point home, let's go ahead and throw up the image showing the weight of the running backs, the four guys in question. You can see that Aaron Jones, despite being a quality running back, no one's denying that, is significantly lighter, 20 pounds lighter than the closest guy. Of course, you have Jacobs and Wilson in the 220s. A.J. Dillon is approaching 250. So it's clear Gutekunst and the entire Packers front office had a strategy to go after the bigger, stronger running back. And I think it's interesting. We're seeing NFL defenses get smaller and lighter year by year by year by year. We're seeing teams go lighter boxes, safeties playing more linebackers. The NFL is zigging that direction. It looks like the Packers very smartly are zagging the other way. I think this is a chance to be a really great strategy for Green Bay. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but first, Packers fans in the comment section below. We're about a month off from the draft right now. We've seen a lot of what the big moves Packers will make in free agency. So shifting our focus to the draft, what do you want the Packers to address with their first pick? Do you have a certain player you've got in mind? You have a certain position group you really want them to address? Give us your thoughts on the Packers' first pick in the upcoming NFL draft and what you think they should do in the comment section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts about the Packers' strategy here, going bigger, much bigger at the running back position?
Yeah, I think this is a example of, we don't look at history a little bit, we're doomed to repeat it. And I think the Packers sometimes were best when they had some beef in the backfield. You go back to the Eddie Lacy days, he was a big, big back. You go back to the days when they had John Kuhn at the fullback. Those are some really great days running the football for Green Bay. So I think you swap Jones for Jacobs. They're both very athletic, very talented football players, but you get Jacobs who can do all of the things that Jones can do, but at a price of being 20 pounds heavier than he is, which I think is quite honestly very impressive if you think about it. So you get the extra size and power in a guy like Josh Jacobs, who's an extra 20 pounds bigger than Aaron Jones, but you still really don't lose any of that viability in whether it's catching passes out of the backfield, whether it's being a dynamic, quick burst runner. I think this is just a really solid upgrade overall if this is the strategy that Gutekunst wants to go for this roster building. And I think you think about what the Packers have done in the days of old, and we've seen it around the NFL. We know that the NFL has been this spread, high-flying offense, and we've seen some of these smart teams come in. Namely, you see the Chargers leaning this way a little bit right now. Going back to that old school, bigger back, downhill power football. That is a way to kind of, as defensives get smaller, try to get smaller linebackers, guys that can do better in coverage. You get these bigger running backs, you're going to be able to punish these small defenses a little bit better. I think this is a really good idea by the Packers GM, Packers front office to build a team that is going before the shift in defenses to be a team that is going to be really successful. So I think this is a great move by Green Bay. I'm curious to see how it pays off in this regular season.
Yeah, because if you look at the top competition in the NFC, right? Obviously, Dallas being one of them. I know the Packers obliterated Dallas, but that's a perfect example. Under former Dallas defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, who's now the head coach at Washington, they're going to implement this style. Dallas played incredibly small, right? They would have outside linebackers, Micah Parsons at defensive ends. They'd move defensive ends inside at defensive tackle. They had safeties playing inside linebacker, right? If you got a big back, you can really take advantage of that and really just pound them into oblivion. I know Aaron Jones was able to have success against Dallas. But the one risk, if you don't have a bigger back, is sometimes those smaller defenders can find a way to make plays. That's what hurt Miami, by the way. Miami didn't have the big back that they needed to in colder weather against Kansas City, who they could turn and hand the football off to, and that killed them in the playoffs. You want to avoid that debacle that happened with the Miami Dolphins. But it's not just Dallas. It's not just Washington with new head coach Dan Quinn. Seattle historically has played incredibly small. The Los Angeles Rams are a very small front seven. If you look at their height and weight, even the great Aaron Donald was a little bit of an undersized player, traditionally defensive tackle, and now the Rams are getting even smaller, right? The 49ers, another top contender in the NFC, they're a smallish front seven that just moved off Eric Armstead, that just moved off Chase Young. So they were small-ish, kind of middle of the road to begin with. They're getting smaller. The Detroit Lions are doing everything they can to scramble to try and get bigger. They're throwing big money at veteran nose tackle DJ Reader, and just for a chance to try and get some more beef inside. Again, because right now the NFL has realized, all the contenders have realized, holy crap, we are tiny at linebacker. We don't have a lot of beef inside. This gives an opportunity for teams that are willing to add more of that beef inside, namely at the running back position, to pound these defenses into oblivion. And here's the other side of that strategy too. The Packers with Jordan Love, and what they proved last season is that they have a cadre of quality receivers, a lot of great dynamic players. Teams are wanted to match up against Green Bay are going to want to send out a lot of nickel packages, a lot of 5 defensive back, maybe even 6 defensive back packages. One way you can get teams out of that is have a big back that can just dominate those lighter boxes with more corners and safeties playing on the field at the time instead of linebackers. So again, the Packers not only are zagging, or when the NFL is zigging this direction, going smaller, the Packers are zagging and going bigger. They're also creating a matchup debacle for opposing defenses. Do they put more DBs on the field to cover all these quality receivers that the Packers have? Or do they put more linebackers on the field? And it's a sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If they don't put more DBs on the field, Jordan Love will shred them. If they put more DBs on the field, they'll hand it off to one of these big backs, and these 230-pound battering rams will obliterate defenses, right? It's sort of these strategic decisions. I know isolated, you don't want to give running backs a lot of money, and historically it's not a good reason to, but there is a core strategy here the Packers are following, and based on the overall structure of their team, I think it has a chance to be a really good one. I am always a fan of teams that notice trends and they figure out ways to exploit them before other teams do, and I think that's exactly what the Packers are doing here.
And Nick, you bring up the Commanders. I think this is a perfect example because not only on defense, you look at what the Commanders did on offense. Who do they bring in at the running back position? Austin Eckler, a guy who's 200 pounds. He's about 10 pounds less than Aaron Jones is. So what do the Chargers do to replace a guy like Austin Eckler? They go out and pick up Gus Edwards, who's 6'1", 240 pounds at the running back position. Then what do the Ravens do when they lose one of their lead backs? They go out and pick up Derrick Henry, who's about 600 or 250 pounds. I mean, get bigger at running backs. These smart teams are getting bigger at running backs, while the, quote unquote dumb teams, the Commanders, haven't been very great, are still trying to value these really small backs. So I think Packers fans, you got to trust the process. This just looks on paper, the really smart teams are doing it, and I think that's where the Packers are. They're a really smart team.